Hello, thanks for joining us today. On behalf of Guidant Global and Amway, we are presenting Services Procurement in the New Normal, why COVID-19 has bolstered the business case for statement of work. My name is Brian Salkowski. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Guidant Global. Hopefully you're familiar with us, but if not, we're a leading global managed services provider for contingent labor and the extended workforce, including services procurement. I have with me today Justin Sellers from Amway. Justin?
Hi everyone, Justin Sellers. I'm a global category leader at Amway, responsible for non-employee labor. And Amway, if you're not familiar, is the world's largest direct selling company with revenue around $8 billion annually. And the category that I manage for us is in the neighborhood of about $250 million in spend a year. One of our recent tasks in this category was to expand our contingent labor program by including statement of work spend, launching the services procurement module. And that's one of the topics you'll hear more about today.
Perfect. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it. So we're going to dive right in here and talk about the scene. The question is, what did COVID-19 or what did the COVID-19 response lay bare for corporate America? And very simply put, it very quickly highlighted for enterprises what information they knew and what they did not know. If we think back to March and the quick pivot to remote work and an adjusted delivery model, virtually overnight, organizations were required to make rapid transformations to how they execute and deliver within their business. And so having a clear view of what extended workers are supporting the organization, who has access, their sponsoring organization, their critical or non-critical role in terms of essential delivery for the organization, and the ability to move that and properly manage it in a new format. I can think back very quickly to a number of conversations I had with operational heads, chief procurement officers, who were asking questions. Hey, we know what temporaries, what traditional contingent workers we have here. Why don't we have that same level of visibility for those that are on a statement of work, that are delivering outsourced services for our organization? How do we quickly manage this while ensuring that our business doesn't incur new gaps as we transition? The second point I would make is very quickly, when we talk about that snap decision to shift delivery models and locations, it reinforced the need for flexibility within the business. That's always been the case, but now more than ever, the need to be agile and be able to pivot at a moment's notice was critically important. If I went back in time and think about the last crisis, the financial crisis, it was really painful. And our clients, other organizations that we're speaking with, coming out of that downturn, took a very deliberate view to their workforce and started looking at the mix. How many employees do we have to non-employees, and not just non-employees, but independent contractors, traditional temporaries? How much are we outsourcing? And the parameters, the paradigm started to shift towards a more flexible model. This latest crisis, the pandemic, has only reinforced that need for more flexibility within the business. And it's inevitable that organizations are using the COVID situation as that opportunity to rebalance even further to future-proof their business. So as we continue on here, the next logical question is, why did the COVID-19 pandemic help bolster the business case for a managed statement of work or services procurement solution for large enterprises? And as I look back in time, just 5-6 months ago now, organizations very quickly shifted to a cost control mindset. It wasn't a preference, it was a business necessity. Demand had fallen sharply, and there was a need to balance external cost overhead delivery to match that demand. So the ability to be agile through quality analytics, quality visibility, and appropriate contract structures was a paramount performance. The other thing that, as we think about the business case, is organizations took a look at this to say, very often when we look at our extended workforce, they're just that. They're an extension of us, and we're controlling that work effort aligned to our projects, initiatives, and ongoing operations. This became an opportunity in that business case to shift the way that we're engaging external supply and make a movement to transform from a purchase of individual efforts to purchasing outcomes. And this is really important when we're talking about statement of work and services procurement specifically, because organizations who have a real-time view of their extended workforce can move quicker, they can spend less, and generate a greater return on investment for that. And in order to do so, it's a matter of shifting additional risk, burden, and an opportunity to their suppliers to take ownership, not just for a level of effort, but for actually delivering fixed outcomes, either finite or ongoing, to the organization. So this has been a really remarkable chain of events, obviously in the larger scale, but also as we look at in the context of procurement organizations and how they engage and interact with that extended overarching workforce. And it has accelerated more now than any other time I can recall in the last 10, 12 years, a quick shift and pivot towards having total enterprise visibility regarding any worker who is accessing site, accessing systems, or interfacing with customers and or employees. So as I say this, of course, not all organizations were in the same state of readiness when the pandemic hit. There are those who had to react and pivot very quickly. There are others who, through very careful and deliberate steps, were in a better situation. I recognize none of us could fully anticipate what's transpired this year, but there were those that had put in place the proper framework and rigors in order to better be able to respond to this scenario. And it's with that, actually, that I gladly turn it back to my partner here, Justin, to talk about Amway and the steps that they actually took 18 months, 2 years plus in advance of the pandemic that put them in I think, a pretty remarkable situation to be adaptive and agile when crises actually hit. So Justin, if I could, I'll just frame it in the form of a question here as it reads at the top of the slide. What did Amway do to get ahead of the curve?
Yeah, like you said, Brian, there's no way we could have predicted what would happen this year, starting in the middle of March. But certainly over the past 6 months, there's been a number of times when I, and I think others have at Amway, have felt really fortunate that we did get as far down the adoption curve with services procurement as we had. It was a huge help to us. It has been a huge help to us during the course of this. So first here, I'll just talk a little bit about how we got to our current state. And for us, it started a couple of years ago when our company was undertaking a pretty significant global review of its org structure, which included some cost-saving metrics and objectives. And our HR team at that time was wise in pitching the deployment of services procurement as a tactic as part of that larger initiative. We had already done temp labor, contingent labor, MSP, VMS program for many years in a pretty mature state, but the expansion into statement of work spend had not yet been done. When we linked up with that larger project, it really gave us kind of the burning platform that we needed to help drive a significant change. It gave visibility and communications. It gave an executive mandate as well. And all of those things were really critical in helping us get people through that change management process by being a part of a larger initiative in the company that was highly visible. The second thing was finding a partner in the MSP space. So we sent out an RFP, went through the full sourcing process to multiple vendors looking for an MSP partner that would be really, that demonstrated an ability to manage a significant change like the launch of services procurement and Guidant Global ended up winning that bid, even ahead of an incumbent provider for us, because we felt that they had that capability and an appreciation for the nuances and the dynamics in our business that would, they'd be able to listen to that, adapt the approach to that, be flexible in coming up with a solution that would make the change sticky in our organization. We stayed really focused. We had some really ambitious goals for the program, even right out of the gate. Our goal or our approach was what kind of ended up being called the Big Bang approach, where all services through our corporate entity were in scope from day one. It was a mandatory program. There was no opting out, and it was all categories at the same time. We wanted 100% of our incumbent supply base onboarded into the program before go live. We wanted every outside services engagement to have a statement of work that had been legal reviewed. So really ambitious goals, and staying focused on those things and keeping those objectives in front of everyone as we're communicating and driving the change was really important in the face of quite a bit of resistance, to be very honest. And we had to do all of this without slowing down the business at the time. And then last bullet on here is around customizing the training approach. So we did mass training and realized that, hey, this is only going to get us maybe 25% of the way there. We, as an internal team, as well as the Guidant Global project team, were really tireless with doing road shows and one-on-ones and small group trainings, live walkthroughs of actually going through the process of getting a statement of work approved. We did whatever we had to do to adapt the message to the audience and make it relevant for their unique needs in their business unit. You can see the results there on the right-hand side, which I won't read through, but suffice it to say these results exceeded our expectations, I think, and Guidant at one point was, in a moment of honesty, let us know that it exceeded their expectations as well. And that's just a tribute to, I think, a strong partnership and a strong focus on getting it done.
I'll say it still exceeds our expectations, Justin. So thank you. And just a quick comment before we move on to the next slide. But I think it's important to note how all of these are intertwined. When we talk about the partnership and collaboration, it's just not the mechanics of how we source, engage, and manage. It's also working within your culture, so that deep partnership between you, your team, your requesters. You talk about the focus and how we had the benefit of the executive sponsorship that you secured. At the same point in time, things always go better and outcomes improve when work is done because it's desired to be, not out of duress. So that close partnership, which is why that customized training and engagement with the business was so important. So there may be four bullet points on the slide, but they are all inextricably intertwined.
Yep, for sure.
So with that said, let's move on to the next question, which is, given the pandemic's impact, how did Amway benefit from being that far ahead of the curve?
Yeah, like I said, it's allowed our transition to a 100% remote work environment happen really smoothly, while adapting to and absorbing new work. So I think a lot of folks listening would attest to the fact that the business had to keep going. There were things that we just had to continue in spite of the circumstances, and then a lot of new work or new complexity came on as a result of how we needed to adapt to the pandemic. So the additional bandwidth that we have, because the Guidant Global team is on site there in our program, they handle statements of work that are below a certain dollar threshold, often very independently. And so really for us, it's an extension of procurement that gives us the ability as Amway employees and sourcing managers to focus more on the higher value statements of work, strategic initiatives, and that sort of thing. We also just benefited from having a well-established process that was repeatable and clear and that people knew. So Building that process discipline allowed for that remote environment to run more smoothly, and to do that in a web-based tool that everyone has access to in real time was extremely helpful. The visibility of our full contingent workforce in the VMS proved really helpful as well. Certainly, I remember the day when we were all sent home on Thursday, March 12th, I think it was. And my first thought, and many of yours, was, okay, well, what does this mean for? We know what it means for employees. What about our non-employees? Like, who can stay? Who has to go home? How do we handle this? Having that visibility in the VMS to everything, both on the temp labor side and on the statement of work side, enabled us to just be that much faster in understanding the scope of the impact, like who all is here to begin with, and how do we decide who will be considered essential, non-essential to be on site. What do we need to communicate to them, and how, and who are the key contacts? All of that stuff just went much more smoothly and quickly. The last piece I'll highlight on here is around worker misclassification. So we feel that by having both temporary labor and services within the program and under close management really helps us mitigate the risk of misclassification by ensuring that we're contracting properly with each labor type. And that can sound like kind of an insurance policy in normal times, but when something like the pandemic happens and unemployment claims are skyrocketing, and we're being forced to make decisions that are difficult sometimes to potentially end contracts and all of that, we feel that mitigating that risk became that much more important for us in this kind of environment. So we, in the second year of the program, which is this year, 2020, the COVID year, our results just kind of continue to grow. We'll double the amount of spend that's going through there, and have a lot of, at this point, success stories and advocates among our hiring managers, among the procurement team, certainly, where I sit. And I think almost most notably or convincingly, we have supplier success stories and advocates, vendors who have some of their spend in the tool for our corporate entity, other spend for an affiliate that's not in the tool, and they're actively asking, hey, when can we move this spend into the program, because we like the way it works. It's very smooth, seamless, easy to use. And that in many ways is a testament, I think, to the Guidant Global team and the partnership. When I get kind of unsolicited feedback around on the Guidant Global program team that's on site, saying how fantastic these folks are and how customer oriented and service minded they are, that's a huge tip of the hat to Guidant and the way that they've supported us.
Well, thanks, Justin. I certainly am not going to take any issue with your kind words. Thank you very much. So as we look forward, how will this set up Amway for continued and incremental success?
Yeah, I think because we've got some of this advocacy now, we feel confident that this is a viable solution for real business problems in a lot of different areas. We're actively looking at expanding the program to new geographies and growing it in a kind of strategic and deliberate way. But I tried to break this down into three different buckets of key stakeholders that are impacted by the decision to implement a services procurement solution. Procurement, where I sit, we really own the program. We partner very closely with human resources, but as I mentioned, we view the program team as an extension of procurement. And so for us, I believe it gives us a higher level of credibility when we approach a business partner with kind of the value proposition of working with indirect procurement, to have a clean, user-friendly, transparent process where we can competitively bid among a group of approved and high-performing suppliers that are all in the tool. It just makes it that much easier to go in front of a business partner internally and sell, the services that we offer. ultimately having all that data on our supply base in the tool, contracts, statement of work, performance measures, all of that stuff is an enabler of our sourcing strategies. And the world before services procurement implementation, it was, a million emails in a million different places, contracts in a legal repository. Much more difficult to kind of get your hands around a category and build a strategy for it. I mentioned the increased capacity that continues to be an asset for us in an environment where costs are being scrutinized very closely, and it's hard to get approval to add full-time or permanent employees. We've really benefited from having the Guidant team to fill that role and give us that capacity. And I already talked about the geographic expansion. We think there's more opportunity in other countries to implement this program and realize similar benefits. For HR, this whole thing actually started years ago with our chief HR officer asking the question of what is the total cost of labor for our company. And we knew employee data very well. We knew temp labor data pretty well. We did not know services, external service, independent contractor data very well at all. So now we're far closer to giving good data-driven answer to that question for our corporate entity as a result of this implementation. And then my belief is that we know that the nature of work is evolving, will continue to do so, and decisions from an HR standpoint around the right mix of labor types, whether we're using and investing in permanent employee capabilities for a certain skill set, or whether we're going to do that from a temp labor perspective, or whether that should be an outsourced function or an external service. Again, we've got one system and one program where all of that current state data resides. And so their human capital strategies can be more data driven as a result. Last but not least is the hiring managers in the functions in the business units. They're being challenged with difficult, budget reductions for the coming year, and we do believe and are working to kind of validate in an objective way how we're getting hard savings out of the program through competitive bidding, through consolidation of the supply base, through working with higher performing vendors and establishing more favorable commercial terms with them. We believe there's real cost savings there. There's also soft cost savings around, lots of areas. Less work to manage a lot of different suppliers, consolidated invoicing, time saved in the process of bidding and contracting. All of those things are real time savers, and the business benefits from that, and they've seen it, and we've got those testimonials now to speak to. And so, yeah, I touched on supplier consolidation. Really, our goal now, we kind of grew the program to get it off the ground, included all the suppliers that were incumbents in the program. Now our objective is to focus our spend with the highest performing ones and grow our business with those that are most strategic and most favorable to working with in the future. So lots of different benefits to the different groups. For us, it's been a big success, though not an easy implementation. And I guess that's kind of what we'll talk about next.
That's actually the perfect segue, Justin. So here we're talking about elements of success and value proposition, ROI for stakeholders, which is always, of course, fantastic to hear in a validation, but it doesn't mean that it was an easy road to get there. And there's a lot of effort that goes into it. There's a lot of start, stops, and lessons learned that come about in the process of a major initiative like this. So thought next we could take a couple moments to talk about some of our key lessons learned and ergo recommendations for those who are building a business case for their own services procurement program.
Yep, and I talked about the executive buy-in and the fact that we had a mandate as part of our kind of global enterprise initiative. That was hugely important to have C-suite level mandate that we will use this program, spend broadly defined as external services will be run through this process. That helps overcome some of the change barrier because you don't have to convince so much. You can point to, hey, this was a decision that's been made. The other side of that, I'll skip to the people element. We kind of touched on this, that the mandate is super important. At the same time, you're going to get through the change management curve faster, and you're going to have better success stories and a stickier change if you pay attention to meeting people's needs, actively listening to what their concerns are, and as much as you can, adapting the approach to meet their needs. And that's where I really believe that finding partnership with an MSP, and for us was Guidant, of course, people that fit with that cultural mindset that you have and how you want to drive a change in your organization is really important. And then the last one I'll touch on is speaking to the ROI. So these programs are not free. We elected to go with a supplier-funded model. And so the cost of that program is not hitting our bottom line directly as an expense item, but we know that there's costs there that may creep back into the system through the vendors who are paying the fees associated with the program. And I think big lesson learned for us was just being well prepared to speak to that question honestly. With hiring managers, that's usually the first, I guess, issue that's taken is, well, we're talking about a cost increase here, or if you're certainly talking to a vendor, that's a concern that comes up. And I think for us, just getting a bit more, I guess, tight with our messaging around, yes, there's a cost to this, but we believe these are the benefits we'll realize as a result, and we've made the decision that the return on that investment is worth it for our company. It helped as we tightened that message.
Yeah, you're great with the segues, because speaking to that ROI certainly helps with change management, which is what I wanted to touch on. And this is actually we spoke to it briefly. Justin did on the first content slide. But change is important, and in particular with initiative like this, it is not a singular event. It's constant both through the project, but even post go live, we're constantly coming back. And it's standard project management. We are planning for the change, we're preparing for the change, we're executing it, but then we're coming back to reinforce the change. So being able to speak to the ROI, building those use cases, listening to the voice of customer, and continue to enhance the program, breeds results, but it also helps manage that change and ultimately adoption, embrace of the program. We touched on suppliers earlier. They're important in that change management process. They're also very important to the outcomes that we deliver. And I would absolutely be remiss if I didn't call out the importance of a well-defined supply chain strategy supporting this. The fact that the suppliers are advocates of the program and seeking to put their activity, their sales through it, speaks volumes. And we always say it's in a good bargain, all parties prosper. And we seek to make that true here. We want to ensure that Amway has the visibility, the cost management, and efficiencies that come with it, but the suppliers have increased sales opportunities, better governance, and also benefit from the same analytics and visibility that comes out of this. So they're a really important part of this. They're part of the change, but they're part of the ongoing solution and collaboration. And the last point here probably could have been the first, which is this is different than traditional contingent labor, temporary labor. We are talking about engaging a supplier relationship to execute on a deliverable, to execute on an ongoing strategic outsourcing. And in turn, the way that we approach that, both the suppliers, the terms and conditions, how we source it, is very different. Also, the skills that we're looking for with the representatives who are executing this, the ability to understand what is a good supply chain strategy? How should we structure an RFX event, structure a contract to ensure good terms and conditions that can be leaned on if things ever get tough. So recognizing that from the beginning, yes, we want visibility across the total extended workforce. We want that reporting. We want that flexibility, but all categories therein are not identical, and having the ability to make differentiation both with the people, the process, and the method of execution is critically important. So I know we are really at the end of our time here, but doesn't mean that we're leaving you. We're happy to take some questions here, but want to start off just by thanking everyone for joining our session. It's a lot of fun sharing what we've done and what we've learned, and we'd welcome to the opportunity to consider, been speaking too much, to continue the conversation through Q&A.